Welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So in today's show, I'm going to start out with a lesson, which I always do. But I want to do is kind of put it all together. So I've talked a lot about over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I've gone through price structure using the moving averages. I've used the MACD. I've used the ADX and explained the uses of those. Now I want to show the use of RSI as a timing tool, where I think it can help you anticipate, especially when you're looking at something that could potentially be breaking out. So let's go ahead and get into this agenda very briefly. I want to go and explain the 2 RSI approach that I use. I want to show how I use it to complement patterns that I'm identifying using the MACD and the ADX, and then using it as a kind of final piece that can really help me tell me that it's ready to go. And then I do like to use it as specific moving average support. So I'm going to go through all that, and then I'm going to go through the symbol requests that came through. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, so let's show a few examples here. Now, I have all the time frames up because I want to show that we are using this in conjunction with, first of all, in multiple time frames, but secondly, we do want to look at what's taking place in the momentum as well in terms of MACD and ADX, and then use the RSI, which is up here on the left, to help confirm. So let's use this double verify. So this was a stock that I highlighted to my subscribers, but I did it prior to this breakout. I was looking at this here and thinking, first of all, this was the first time we were pulling back to rising moving averages, right? And yes, it really hadn't broken out yet out of this area. If we look at this kind of like this was a consolidation pattern. It was showing signs of turning the corner, but this is now we're getting the moving averages to rise. Now this pullback, really, this pullback was prior to the breakout. We don't have confirmation here, but why do I want to look at this and watch this really closely? Well, there's a couple things. Number one, there is a pinch play developing on the weekly chart. So we pulled in. This was the second pinch play on this situation, but this was the first time where the 18 was above the 40 and both lines were rising. Also had green DI starting to show signs of improvement. But what really caught my eye is if we go and look at the RSI here, while these pinch plays are developing, look at this RSI 20. So the RSI 20 is the red line. And when that is above 50, we are in a pretty strong trend. And when we're below 50, we're in a weak trend. But I don't just use those exact numbers. What I'm looking for is pivot lows. So if we can make a higher low and the RSI 20 can hold 50, which it did not do here, if you notice. And in fact, if you go back through all the pivots that took place during this whole phase, every single time the RSI 20 came down below the 50 line until we got to here. This is the first time we actually came down and RSI 5 got oversold below the 50 mark, right? And RSI 20 held the 50 mark. Do you see that? So every other time this pulled back below, stayed below, this was another pullback below, and then back here was the other time that happened. You notice how RSI 5 got under, but these did this time during this pullback, the RSI 20 held above. So this is the first time it happened, and we had a nice move to follow. And then the same thing happened here. So what I'm telling you is if I see that developing underneath, it's almost like the momentum is starting to flip back to the positive side. Even though we haven't broken out yet, I'm anticipating a breakout at that point, and I might even go down to the smaller time frame and go ahead and jump in and jump the gun a little bit, or just take a higher pivot low. This is the low bar in the move. We close above the low bar right here. So if you want more information on pivots and stuff like that, that is in my course. But anyway, so if we make a higher low like that right at the moving average, what I like about these patterns when they develop is I really like the 40. If we can pull back to the 40 and it's rising and we have that set up, especially if there's a sign of MACD like a pinch or something like that, I think it's really attractive. Let me give you a couple other examples really briefly. So here's Boeing, and if we look at this, So let's actually look at the RSI first. If you notice here, we get this move to the upside, and our RSI 20 is hovering well above while the RSI 5 is staying below. All right, now through this whole period, look at this. This was the first time the RSI 20 really got above. This is a pretty interesting setup. Now, where it becomes more interesting to me is actually the fact that MACD, let's just look at the MACD on the weekly, came down, rallied up, and here it was overrunning the signal line. So I don't really want to take this setup. I don't want to take this first signal. I want to wait for it to come down and take the second one, and that's where we have a reverse divergence. This is making a higher bottom, and this is making a lower bottom. So I started to highlight it right in here as this is emerging. Why? Because I had the combination of reverse divergence. I had good ADX, and I knew that we were getting another RSI buy signal where we were making a pivot low while the 5 RSI was below and the RSI 20 was staying above 50. So those are the types of things where you can sort of say, you know what, I can get in this ahead of the breakout and go ahead and play this move anticipating a breakout. All right, let me give you one more example. LRCX, another one that I highlighted, and it was interesting because it had gone sideways for a while here, but then I started to highlight it right here. And we had this sort of sideways consolidation and good ADX. We had a pinch play developing, all of that. And we did have RSI on the weekly chart showing a nice pattern. Let's just zero in. You see how this was getting back above and holding? But what caught my eye was with the daily chart. While this was consolidating here and just going sideways, this is not showing any sign of improvement when you look at price. But look at what the momentum did right before. So every one of these overran the 50 level. 20 RSI can't hold, 50 can't hold, and then look at what happened here. 2 times in a row. Right before the breakout, it holds. It's telling me that the sellers are losing strength and this is probably getting ready to break out. So it's a reason why there are times when I'm looking to anticipate and look for a breakout pattern using the RSI in conjunction with everything else that I'm doing. So anyway, I thought this would be helpful, something to be on the lookout for. Let's go ahead and get into the individual stocks now. If you're enjoying the show, hit that like button and also subscribe so you can get future content. So also, just briefly, my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. And I've gotten some questions about this. So just to reiterate, if you take the individual package monthly, you will have access to the trading courses. There's 2 trading courses now. There's a swing trading course to go along with the trend and momentum course, which I call the foundations course. Anyway, if you have an interest in that, you can go to rabilstockresearch.com/services. Let's go ahead and get on with the symbols now. Okay, so let's start out with the Nasdaq Composite. Obviously, very strong index. We can see on a relative basis, it has been really good when you look at this black line relative this whole year since the beginning of 2023 relative to the S&P. So we want to keep an eye on this because it is the leader right now. Well, Nasdaq 100 is probably the leader, but in terms of the big indexes, I would say this one is leading the S&P, leading the Dow. So what I'm looking for now are signs of some kind of a topping pattern developing because we've made a really strong move. And let's just take a quick look at the RSI and actually the relative strength. So this is the relative strength, and we can see from the beginning of this year, from this bottom right here, from that point on, we've seen not only price improvement, but we've seen relative improvement, which is really important. We want to have both of those taking place. We can see the trend line break here, which coincided with the price trend line break. I also want to point out, look at the RSI here and off the peak. So we make a top and we break the 50 level for the red line. You see this red line breaking? And then look at this RSI sell signal where it rallies up, it doesn't get above 50, and the RSI 5 gets above. That's right here at this peak. And then look at this signal here, another sell signal, where we rally up. This gets super overbought, even above the 70 level, but RSI 5 can't get above 50, so that's another signal. And then we had one more here, but it ended up being muted. It caused it to go down, but it didn't go to a new low. So that was sort of an important sign here on an RS basis where we came down and made a double bottom. This actually made a higher low. But it wasn't leading to new lows like it did the prior two times. So we knew there was probably a sign of some form of a shift, and then the relative strength took over, and it tells you a lot more. Now, I will say we're at 93, 94 in the RSI 5 right now. If we go back and look, historically speaking, this doesn't happen all that often. The last time this happened was 2020, but I want to warn you on something. When this peak took place was January 13th, and it went up for 4 more weeks. It pulled back a week, and then it went up for 3 or 4 more weeks, and then created divergence. So we've got a new high here. That doesn't necessarily mean we're just going to fall off a cliff because we're getting up into this 90 area. It means you got to be a lot more careful about new entries, I like to look at the individual stocks themselves rather than using the indexes to make that determination. But we want to start watching this a lot more closely because we're up in the area where we should be having problems. Now, when I go to the daily chart, I think we're continuing to make higher highs. We're continuing to get confirmation here. ADX is showing good strength and rising with it. The volume pattern looks good. For the first time in this move, we've pulled back and gone to a new high, and the DI is not confirming yet, right? It isn't making a new high with price. So that's the first sign that the buyers are losing strength. The green line is telling us the strength of the buyers. So they're not as interested in buying up here as they were back here. That's what this is telling us. But look at what also it's telling us. Look at how low the sellers are. You see how weak they are? It's down at 10. Whenever it's below 15, you know they're really, really weak. But the fact is that there's no sellers. So the buyers are not as interested, but there's no one willing to sell yet. Do you see what I mean? So we need to see this red line pop and probably get up over 15 before we can expect some type of a little bit more of a correction, more than just maybe a little pullback to the moving average or something like that. In fact, if we start to see sellers show up on the red line here, then what we could probably expect is a pullback closer to, next support underneath. Like it'll show up on a weekly chart. As opposed to, if you notice, we haven't really seen a pullback that's shown up on a weekly chart yet. We get these little tiny dips on the daily chart, but they're not even showing up on the weekly. So the next time that's going to happen on the weekly, in my opinion, is where the red line, there's the sellers on the daily chart start to kick in. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at the opposite end of the spectrum, the IWM. You notice how this has been weak, but it's starting to show maybe some signs of life a little bit. Now, there hasn't been enough of improvement, and we haven't had an RSI buy signal, right? We had some sell signals, same as we had on the Nasdaq, but we haven't had that pattern where we make a strong move to the upside and pull back and make a higher low, and where the RSI 20 holds above the 50 level. We're just waiting for that to take place. I think that would be pretty significant. Now, obviously, we want to focus in on the momentum characteristics here. The fact that we're getting above these two moving average lines is a good sign, but we need confirmation here. We need confirmation here. So green is crossing above red, but it's still well below the 25 line. As I mentioned with the S&P, we want to see this cross above the 25 line. That's happening in the S&P, but it isn't happening here. I do believe there's a lot of resistance up at 200. So it's not anything to get too excited about, but this is the sign of improvement on a short-term basis. This is a little bit of hope here. What we're going to need to see is this hold and make another new high. And if we see that with confirmation on the ADX and the MACD, then we can probably expect to move up towards 200. And I think that would improve our chances for the overall market environment. I don't think we have a great chance of doing a long bull market while this is hanging out like this. I think this is going to have to show a lot more improvement to have a extended bull run to the upside. That would be classic bull market material. We can have a bull market, something that classifies as a bull market that doesn't extend. all right, and doesn't continue to the upside. And we're seeing that right now. We've made a big enough move off the low to call it a bull market. I don't know that we're in the position to say it's running on all cylinders. All right, lots of expansion. Don't get me wrong, and this is showing that there's improved expansion taking place. But we're going to need more improvement out of this, I think. Okay, let's go to NNOX. So I had some questions about this because a lot of guys were asking me, and I got a few questions from subscribers even. This pullback, why wouldn't this be a setup? And the reason why I was telling guys I didn't really want to play this is because I felt like, yeah, it could come and test this high, but I didn't feel like we were going to continue to the upside. And what was my reasoning? I mean, we can look at it on this chart with the MACD. So we haven't had any real pullback from this move, this dynamic move, big volume, really strong momentum, nothing just showing that we've hesitated. So I like to buy the first pullback after we get strength like this. And the reason I like to play the pullback is I want to see if there's any sellers. Remember, we've got all this decline here. All these people are underwater. All right, so I want to see how serious they are after a big move, or are they open to let this consolidate and then maybe get more out of this because they believe in the company. So it tells me a lot how it reacts after a strong move. So far, so good. But look what happened. If we go back to our friend the RSI, we don't have that RSI signal. We need to get this to pull back and hold and go below 50, and this hold. And if we get that, then I feel like on a weekly chart, we've got something to really sink our teeth into, especially if we can get a buy signal off the daily from there. So I would keep these things in mind when you're looking at the strength out of a basing pattern. Use the RSI 5 on the weekly to make sure you're not buying into an overbought condition. All right, I think that'll be really helpful. And I just think there's more pause or pullback coming. Remember, we don't have to pull back that much for that RSI 5 to drop down. Okay, let's look at DVN. So DVN has gone through a correction with a lot of energy stocks, and I think it's overrun the 18-month a little too much. I think what's going to end up happening here is, yeah, we could rally up and then maybe come back down. This is going to need to work its way back down to zero now, I think. We might get a intermittent rally first and maybe form like an pinch underneath the declining signal line before it comes back down again. Now, the reason why I'd keep looking at this is because the ADX is still pretty strong, and the 18 has not actually rolled over yet. So if we got real strength coming off the low, I mean power, it would have to show up in the form of green DI, really breaking out and turning this. Then I would have a lot more interest in this as long as this has not rolled over. There are a lot of stocks in the energy area where this is definitely not rolling over and the pullback is not as deep. I would probably focus in on them over a DVN. This one is probably a little bit lower on the totem pole for me. Okay, CP. So yeah, this one was showing real signs here, but it was never able to break out of this base. And we can do that on either time frame. I just wanted to show when we go back on the monthly, we never really got the buy signal. And then what happened last week, a little violent to the downside. We're still using the same strategy. We have to get a breakout play. All right, there's no change here. We're sitting here waiting. We're being patient. We need a breakout. Now, if the breakout comes from here, if it goes straight up, it'll be a little overbought. And then I'm probably going to use the daily to enter on some kind of a pullback. But if it works its way up and then hesitates and then turns back up, you can buy the breakout right as it takes place on the weekly chart. So no change in strategy here. It's just taking a little bit longer, and maybe it'll never break out. I don't know, and that's why I'm waiting. All right, so I got to get this move through all these highs based on this low ADX condition. That's still our strategy. So on PayPal, the questions asked, I know this is an ugly chart, but do you think we're bottoming? I really do. I do think this is forming a bottom. All right. I think so. If I were to look at this like a bell-shaped curve, I think this is what's happening here. I think it's going to take some time. I don't think you're going to see real improvement in this probably until, end of the year. Something like that. I think it's going to take more time to form this base. And this could be, if you think about it in terms of like a inverted head and shoulders. This could be the shoulder, this could be the head, and then we could come back, and then we could form the right shoulder. I mean, it's just going to be a time-consuming process where on a relative basis, it continues to underperform. It just doesn't look like guys are serious about this right now. But do I think this is going to continue to trend to the downside? I really don't. I view this all as a part of a basing process. I just wouldn't be in any big hurry to be a buyer. Okay, so I got a question related to last week's lesson, which was the RSI, the ADX signal to give us a signal of exhaustion. Now, this is a little bit more complex, so I'm really glad this question came. So let's first look at this on a daily chart to explain the signal. So we show a move to the upside, and we're showing real strength. We're actually getting confirmation on a MACD basis, but let's just focus on ADX. ADX confirms here, and this is an important part of this signal. It confirms again here as we're going up. You see how we're getting confirmation of real strength in the trend? And then we continue to trend to the upside, and notice how this just dies out. This has just completely died out. Now, there's two components to this. We need price to confirm, and we haven't had any real price reversal to take place. We are getting MACD to kind of confirm, but in this case, I'm not as worried about that either. I really want price to form some kind of a signal. It's probably going to have to take place in the form of a move back to the 40 and then a failure at the 18 or something like that. But if I'm in this and I'm trying to determine like a sell signal, I would say I might have seen enough to want to maybe take some profits or reduce the position. Now, if we go to the weekly chart, we know that this trend is really strong. There's no sign of divergence whatsoever. So what does that mean when we have one time frame telling us one thing and the other telling us another? Well, on this time frame, on the daily time frame, I'm expecting a reversal. That means the 18 is going to come down through the 40 sometime over the next 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. That's what I would be expecting, a correction on this time frame that forces the 18 down through the 40, or at least extensive enough to get the MACD down closer to the 0 line. That's what I'm looking for on this time frame. On this time frame, that's probably just a pullback to the 18 week. So that's really all we're looking for, is a correction back to here on this time frame. But in this time frame, it's going to look like a reversal. See that? And that's what this is telling us. So that's how I would play this. I'm a short-term trader. I'm leaning toward taking profits and saying, you know what? I've made a really good run in this, uninterrupted run. It's probably due, based on what I'm seeing on the daily, for a correction back to the 18-week line. Now, in the correction, it might end up being a little bit deeper than that. But right now, based on the strength of this move, I'm not really expecting that. Okay, let's look at energy fuels. So I've been talking to my subscribers about what's going on in the URA, which is the ETF for the uranium. There's a lot of improvement on a bigger picture pattern. I still think this is in play. We're coming down to the 0 line on the monthly chart here, and this looks a lot like the URA. Coming down to here, this is showing a lot of strength and momentum, and notice how the sellers have not been able to overcome the buyers on this long-term chart. So it's still in play to the upside. What's missing is strength. We're going to need to see buyers really step in here on a weekly chart, show some strength, get the green to break out, and then we could buy the first pullback. I mean, this is early. We're still got a declining 18-month line, but this is something you definitely want to be watching just based on what's taking place here. Okay, look at UNH. So a lot of bad news on this yesterday. I wanted to point out, when I look at price structure, so there's a lot of things going on this chart. So first of all, we have this trend line that was broken. We could actually use this as the trend line, and we broke that, and then we came back and tested this line, tested this area. So this is 1, this is 2. All right, now the 3 is coming back down through here. You see this coming back through this low, but you see how it happened? It did it via of like a quick gap, and it came all the way back, a quick down move, and it didn't really last there very long. So that's, to me, that's a questionable 3. But we know we're basically watching for a clear, and I would look for maybe even at this point, maybe a closing week break to create a 3, and then we're going to see the 18-month roll over, and we're going to have a lot more weakness in this trend. We don't have that yet, so I actually talked to this about my with institutional clients, and I'm still kind of considering this in a transitional phase right now unless we get a little bit more weakness. Now, here's the problem. If you're a money manager, this has been a terrible stock, and this just hit another new low on a relative basis. So even though price isn't going to a new low, the relative is going to a new low. That just totally tells me that I just don't want to be here. This isn't the type of stock for me. I want stocks that not only are showing price action, but they're also showing relative performance. Now, look at what's going on here with the PLTR. Look at this breakout to the upside. Look at the dynamics of this move. You see this, how the MACD is opening up a big move. This is showing real momentum behind this. Look at the volume pattern and look at the ADX. This is the kind of move we're looking for. And then again, I would kind of go back to my old friend RSI here and say, let's look for our first signal. Red has been below for this whole period, and we haven't had a signal where this RSI 5 comes down underneath. Look for that in this situation, and you won't be chasing. You'll be getting a good solid signal. Now, the other way to do it is to watch for an opposing trend trigger, opposing trend pattern on the daily. Thanks for joining me. My contact information is listed. If you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.